Unbelievable! Are you looking for a no-nonsense property and business podcast? Our mission is to provide jam-packed content straight to your ears, where we can add value and unpick the fluff in the industry. If this sounds like a bit of you, then strap in and hold tight for an episode with Heidi and Dan.
Welcome to another week's episode of Unbelievable Property Podcast. Today we have Rob McPhun. So welcome to the podcast, Rob.
Thanks very much, Dan and Heidi, for having me. I'll tell you what, it won't be boring. I'm sure it'll be very interesting. Hopefully I'll make it interesting anyway. So yeah.
It will be. Well, I mean, you've got an extremely interesting career. So, let's roll back, tell us a bit about yourself. But just as a general overview, you spent many years in the police force. You're now a property investor, business coach, expert, mentor, and author. So we'll cover all of that throughout the podcast. But yeah, let's roll back to the early years, Rob. Who was Rob growing up, and how did you get to where you are now?
A lot of how I grew up has actually determined where I've ended up today, actually, in many respects. But I joined the police when I was 16 years of age, and back in 1974. So I was the archetypal, and I would recommend any of your listeners to sort of read Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I didn't come to a lot of self-development until later on in life, but I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki and basically realised that I had done somebody else's plan rather than my plan in terms of life. And so I did the archetypal, go to school, get your qualifications, go out and get a job and work hard for the rest of your life. And that's how things pan out. So I left home, which was Cleethorpes. I was born in Cleethorpes, born and bred in Cleethorpes. But moved across the wall. Yeah, awesome. I'm a Meggies lad. So moved across the...
Well, I'm from Immingham, so...
Both as bad as each other.
We were a bit posher, really, but, than Immingham. But, yeah. No, so I moved across the Hull when I was 16, joined the police, and spent the next 34 years living out somebody else's plan, i.e. working for somebody else. And obviously, I wasn't making the police rich, but I wasn't really particularly rich myself either. I'm very fortunate that, although I didn't appreciate it at the time, what I have now got, which has enabled me to be successful in properties, having a pension behind me, which I'll come on to in due course, because I think my life splits into three sort of main areas, really, which was 34 years in the police, then I went into business on my own, I became a hypnotherapist, and then the latter stages, i.e. in the last 10, 12 years, I've been involved in property. So throughout my police career, I sort of was a PC for about nearly 18, 19 years. And then I went into training. So I sort of policed Hull, North Hull, West Hull, Bransholme.
You poor bastard.
I thoroughly enjoyed it in many respects. Thoroughly enjoyed it. I was, again, many of your listeners won't be old enough but I was at Orgreave for the miners' dispute. I was Toxteth riots. All of those things, because I was in the support group then. And after about 20 years, I went into training. So that's when I realised that I actually loved training. I loved passing on my knowledge and experience, particularly experience rather than knowledge, onto other people. And that's where I was trained as a coach and a mentor, as an assessor, and as a trainer of people. So I was then fortunate that I sort of went through the ranks and ended up as the learning and development manager for the force prior to my retirement about 2008. So 2007 I retired. So that's 17 years ago. Retired from the police and basically looked around for something else to do. Nikki, my partner, was still in the police. And then that developed into a reason why that I wanted to get into property. Those intervening years, I formed my own company, and I'm going to be quite honest here and say that I played at it. I wasn't serious about it. I didn't really need to be. I had an income from a pension. I had an income from Nicola as well. So in effect, I just played at being a hypnotherapist to a degree. I was a good one, and I was very successful in helping a lot of people achieve what they wanted to achieve, particularly in weight loss and smoking and things like that. but realised that it didn't particularly float my boat. So what happened then, like a lot of things in life, is Nicola, events start to overtake you, and a reason why developed in order for me to get involved in property, which was Nicola became ill and poorly and anxious and depressed. She was in the police. We thought it was down to austerity. It was actually down to the fact that she was also going through the menopause, and that's a story in itself, her journey through the menopause. So we looked around for a lot of things to replace Nicola's wages, and we kept coming back to property. And I'm going to be quite upfront here and say I didn't want to particularly get involved in property, and Nicola certainly didn't want to get involved in property. And I know from some of the Facebook posts that Heidi puts on that dealing with some of the people that you deal with in property, particularly tenants and things like that, can be stressful and can hard work, and you need to have, I think, a certain resilience in order to do that. So, but we looked around, and the best thing to do for us was to get into property, because most of the people I know who are wealthy, and I use the term wealthy quite deliberate as opposed to high income earners, those people who are wealthy have got property. You know, they've either made the wealth in property, or having made the wealth elsewhere, invest in property. So, as you know, and obviously you are aware that there are rival, networks to PPN and things like that, and nobody's precious about it, because I've been to progressive events, but my chosen path in terms of training was the Property Investors Network and Simon Zucchi's mastermind. So we went on his 1 day training, his 3 day training, and then we did his full mentorship program, because personally I was very risk averse. I thought property would be dangerous if we didn't do it properly. So I'm a massive advocate in educating myself. So we paid for the mentorship. We did the 1 year's mentorship. We still had very limiting beliefs about property. So we set a target of Nicola's wages being replaced within 2 years. We were fortunate enough that with our background, with our skill set that I'd developed in the police, and the fact that I was mortgageable through having a pension, that we managed to replace her wages in about 9 months. And so she resigned from the police
Nice.
in 2014. And she's not worked since, other than doing bits and bob with the property portfolio. So it was a natural fit when I've completed the mastermind program, that 1 year's mentorship, to go into coaching and mentoring, which is what I did with, that program that I'd been on. I went into coaching and mentoring. So I've done that now since 2014, being a coach and mentor. So I've been a coach and a mentor for individuals since 1992, but because I've now got the property knowledge, I've bolted that on, and I now coach people mainly in property and mainly in the different strategies that there are. We built up a portfolio. Our property journey was, we built up, because of where we live, and I think you're exactly the same. And I know your podcast will probably go out nationally, if not internationally, but we're in the north of England, and so we were fortunate enough to be able to get houses, single lets that stacked up. We got flats that stacked up, and HMOs obviously that stacked up. So didn't do any rent to rent. I didn't need to do any rent to rent, not that any came my way. But basically, I've done PLOs, purchase lease options, as well as purchasing. And then basically, since then, I've done training with people. I still work with that program and train other people on it now. And then, as you know, Heidi, I like coming around the country and talking at different meetings, talking about either my journey or what's happened to me since, which is writing my book, Perfecting Property Conversations, based around a conversation model where I talk about helping people fact find and get the best deal, for a win-win deal for them and the vendor or whoever it is who's getting rid of the property. So a long-winded answer, which is often what people get from me, because I'm a bit of a talker. But hopefully that gives you a bit of background to me.
Yeah, it's perfect, and I think that's a comprehensive overview. But that's what our listeners want. They want to understand your experience and what they can draw from you. And you've got a lot of experience. Like you say, you've spent 34 years in the police and over 10 years worth of property experience. So you're, what's the saying, is it long in the tooth? Is that the saying? With regards to your experience around the training and the coaching. And you touched on a couple of things there that I just want to pick up on, which I think is important. One thing that I resonate with, or both I resonate with, the Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That's the book I read, and it just gave me a light bulb moment. Like you say, understanding assets and liabilities, and why am I doing what I'm doing when there's sort of an exit out there or an option out there to be able to do something else. And I want to touch on the limiting beliefs as well, because you said although you didn't want to go into property, but you went into property and you went into it with limiting beliefs. I think a lot of people get into property with limiting beliefs, and it's, I was one of the sticklers to think, all this mindset bullshit that everyone talks about, and I've mentioned it before on other podcasts, but mindset is really, really important, and you need to take away them limiting beliefs in order to succeed. So can you just talk a bit about your limiting beliefs and how you overcame that for someone who may be in a similar position?
Yeah, I think we all have limiting beliefs in different aspects of our lives, and wherever we come from, and even confident people will still have limiting beliefs, although I prefer to sort of call them empowering and disempowering beliefs. So empowering ones are those where it gives you confidence, and then disempowering is basically those that hold you back. And I've been coaching in property for about 10, 12 years now, and even a lot of the people that come to the coaching calls have got such limiting beliefs. And my limiting beliefs at the time, I think, are not really that much different from what a lot of people have. Like, I've not got enough money, property's risky, I'm not going to have, I haven't got the right knowledge base. I don't really want to have loads of debt and mortgages. And even my friends now will say, "Oh God, Rob, how many mortgages have you got? How much are the mortgages?" And one of my limiting beliefs, for example, was about the mortgage. After 34 years in the police, you can imagine, I'd actually paid off the mortgage on my own property. You then have that limiting belief of, good debt, and bad debt. I don't want debt. I want to get rid of debt as soon as I can. And then you start to learn about the difference between good debt and bad debt. And bad debt being for holidays and spending on nice bottles of champagne and, as Heidi would, prosecco and things like that. And then you've got that good debt, which is leveraging. It's not really debt, it's leveraging money. So I learned about leveraging money, and you can leverage two things in a business in order to scale it up. You can leverage money, you can leverage time. So I paid off the mortgage on my house. So the first thing I did when I underwent the training and I learnt the difference was I remortgaged the house and released not all of it, because I was still risk averse. I didn't want to release all of it. Some would have released all of the equity, but I released about 50% of the equity, which I felt comfortable with, and then started to use that to invest in properties. And it's interesting because I always have to highlight this point, that if Nicola had not come on the training with me, my wife, if she'd not come on the training with me, I cannot even begin to imagine what would have happened if I'd have come back from a training day and said, "Oh, guess what, darling? We've just paid 25 years. We've just spent 25 years paying the mortgage off. I'm now going to get another mortgage." I think she'd have said, "Well, you can choose a door or a window, but you're going out of one of them." So at the end of the day, if she hadn't been on board, we wouldn't have been able to do it. So one of the limiting beliefs was good debt versus bad debt, remortgaging the house and using it to invest. Another one was, well, if it's that easy, why isn't everybody doing it? Why isn't everybody investing in property and becoming a millionaire and all of these things? And what you realise is that there isn't a scarcity of money, there's an abundance of money. And just because I make money doesn't mean I'm making somebody else poor necessarily. All of those concepts you need to overcome if you're going to scale up a business and invest in yourself and invest in property. Another one was, using other people's money. and buying a house for £1 or getting and acquiring a house for £1. I now understand, and I pass on all of those concepts. And because it's interesting when I talk and when we train purchase lease options, lots of people come out after the training and they go, I just don't understand purchase lease options. And I say, you do. You understand it perfectly. What you're really asking me is, why would anybody do that? Why would a landlord give you their property? Well, rest assured, when you come across a potential landlord who's looking to divest themselves of their portfolio or their property, you will fully get the concept of a purchase lease option and why it works, which is why I've done some, So they were some of the disempowering beliefs that I had that actually stopped me getting into property. Now, this is interesting as well. Some of my colleagues in the police were involved in property, and I used to listen to their stories and think, that's not for me. Not because they were horror stories, just because of my limiting beliefs and disempowering beliefs that I thought, it's not for me. And if I don't have regrets because, life's too short. But I do genuinely wish that I'd got involved in property at a much earlier stage than I did 12 years ago. One of our limiting beliefs was we would not be able to replace Nicola's wages in that 2 years. And it actually took us about 8 or 9 months. Really phenomenal sort of achievement and just it changed our lives. It changed our lives completely. That she was not tied down by the police anymore and tied down by a 9 to 5 or basically, obviously a full-time job. And suddenly we had freedom to go away and choices. One of the things I haven't mentioned is I don't have any children. So our reason why did not include leaving a legacy for, my family or anything like that. But, we are in the fortunate position that any money that we've got, we can spend on ourselves, which is why as I was chatting to you before the podcast began, we have a holiday home in South Africa. We used to also have a holiday home in Spain as well. So, which we then sold to a tenant buyer, believe it or not. So,
nice. That's awesome. I admire how not late you started, but the fact you'd had like a full career and then started. So like, I come up against so many people that go, oh, I should, I don't know when to start. It's too late for me. And I always think that about myself. So that's really nice to.
There's a Chinese proverb saying, I was going to say there's a Chinese proverb saying, and I think it relates to what we're discussing is, the best time to start is, 10 years ago or 1 year ago or 5 years ago. The second best time is now. And I think it's about, not jumping in, like say, taking calculated or mitigated risks. But one of the things that can help the disempowering or the empowering beliefs is immersing yourself in an environment where people are doing it. Because if you're not in that environment, you're not going to know about all these different strategies and using other people's money and leverage and consumer debt versus good debt, leverage debt, mortgage debt, all them sort of things. And I think until you're sort of around it and you learn about it and you understand the nuances, it's like having a mentor, isn't it? If you start a job or an apprenticeship, you learn the trade by associating or being surrounded by the people doing what you're trying to do. If you wanted to be a plumber, you wouldn't go to a college that does music and try and learn it that way, would you? You go, you know what I mean? You go, unless you're stupid, but then that begs the question why you're in college anyway. But then you literally will immerse yourself around the people that are doing the things that you want to do.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a couple of little anecdotes about that. Really, is I was waiting for Nicola outside the Nick, and we'd really just started in property. We were only into it for about 2 or 3 months, and I was stood outside the Nick waiting for Nicola to come out. And one of my former colleagues was stood there, and he's stood there, and he's got all his uniform on, and this, that, and the other. And he sort of said to me, "Oh, you're looking well, Rob. What you doing?" And I said, "Oh, we're getting into property, and I'm investing in property." And he went, "Oh, blimey, that's risky, innit?" And I didn't think anything of it until I walked away. And then I thought, hang on a minute, without being too melodramatic, you've got an ASP, the metal truncheon, you've got your CS spray, you've got your taser. Your next call could be a bloke with a knife at a domestic dispute. Yeah. And you're saying to me that what I'm doing, where I could lose a few bob, is risky. So why didn't I, when I was 34 years as a copper and 20 years on the beat as a PC, feel, Christ, this is too risky, I don't want to do this? And so I actually wrote an article about it in one of the national property magazines about people's attitude to risk. Why was his attitude to risk about property totally different from the risks that he took on a daily basis? And I thought, number one, while I was in the police, I had specialist knowledge. I was trained well in how to deal with conflict and speak to people and calm situations round, which is where that leads to my book about perfecting conversations. Secondly, I had that support network around me, which was my colleagues and everybody who understood what we were doing and what we were trying to achieve. And if I shouted for help, I'd like to think they would come for me, although there were one or two who probably wouldn't have done, But, the truth is, I'd like to think they'd all come and help me if I shouted help. And then thirdly, I had all the equipment. And the way I see it in property, and I wrote in the article, specialist knowledge, the right people around you, and the specialist equipment I equated to having the right power team, the right broker, the right solicitor, the right planners, the right maintenance people. That's the equipment that you have around you. So if you've got those three things, then basically you are drastically mitigating the risk of something going wrong. Being able to, like Heidi does, we've got a mutual contact, Heidi, haven't we, that basically I'm mentoring, but I know he's running stuff past Heidi as well, and so basically having that, I always call it the safety net, because doing training programs and having a coach and a mentor is not just about making money. It's about making sure you don't lose money by doing the wrong deal and putting yourself out there on a limb and buying a lemon, when you don't need to. So that was one sort of anecdote in relation to having the right people around you. And the other one is basically when I did come to write my book, I basically told my family I'm going to write a book, and their attitude was, yeah, right, so what, and I went, okay. I said it's going to be an Amazon #1 bestseller. Oh yeah, right, okay. You go then into your environment of your colleagues, as it were, the peers that I've now got. I'm going to write a book. The next thing is like, oh, I know somebody who can help. Have a word with this person. What are you doing, Dan? What are you doing? Have a word with this person. Have a word with that person. And the next thing you know, you've got that enthusiasm about you, around you, which rubs off on you. It's the same actually with property. That I actually, when we told my family that we were going to get into property, Nicola and I, every single person in my family, and it's a fairly large family, said, you've been suckered, So it basically, because they're just negs, they're negheads. So,
I totally agree. And I think, like you say, it's context and environment, isn't it? And, they always say, you're the average of the 5 people you spend time with, all that sort of stuff. Heidi's lost it because my phone dropped. She's absolutely gone. For those listening and not watching the video, Heidi's laughing her off because my phone dropped on the recording. But
it was because I'll watch it on YouTube. I'm dying.
I know.
And then Rob's going, "What are you doing, Dan?" Oh God.
Yeah. But you kept up with the flow. But context environment is important. And like you say, being in the police, having, like you say, the specialist knowledge and the tools and the people around you that, like you say, you'd hope that will come and help you, that take that into any environment. And what you say about the negs and, I'm going into property. Oh, why are you going into that? You don't know about it. And you're not going to sit down the pub with your mates who aren't interested in that and then talk about it, because they're always going to have a negative effect or a negative outlook on it.
There's too many keyboard warriors, isn't there? And you've probably experienced this, where you've gone to a vendor, you've gone to an estate agent, and they're very blinkered, they're very short-sighted, they don't look outside of the box, they don't look outside of their experience. And I'm an NLP and Neurolinguistic practitioner, so basically the danger is that we look at the world from our point of view and we think that is how the world is, and the reality is it's not, of course. So it's crucial to surround yourself with the right people, mentors, coaches, and you don't have to pay, for the earth for it per se. But, I do believe that you have to make an investment in yourself for two reasons, really. It self-selects then. You've got quality around you because you're paying for it. And secondly, you're putting a stake in the ground. That's one of the dangers when you go to lots of free training. And no disrespect to those people who provide free training. There are a lot of wannabes who go to free training because it's free. And I think we've all been in large rooms with large, and I've been to free training, and a training is valuable in itself, but a lot of the people in the room, are not going to go away and actually implement any of it.
Oh, no, there's loads like that, absolutely. Like I did some property training years ago, and fun fact, I couldn't get into Rich Dad Poor Dad. I found it such a difficult read, I give up. Did some training, didn't resonate with the trainers, and then again give up for about 5 years, and then thought, oh fuck it. So you've got to have that mindset to get into it properly, because it is bloody hard, isn't it? Bloody hard work.
Yeah, you've got to have a drive to get in.
Yeah, and the support. And when you were saying, Rob, about when you was a police officer, I used to work in the prison sector and work like hostels, and I used to work with, and I think I was 19, 20 when I was in charge of like an 18-bed hostel with sex offenders and murderers. And then I found property terrifying, and I was like, oh my God. And like you said, surround yourself with the right people, make sure you can get help, make sure you're honest as well, because there's a lot of fluff online where people talk shit, and then if something goes wrong, they can't say anything. And that's why my Facebook is so honest, because you ask for help, you get help then, don't you? So yeah, I resonated with that, definitely.
Yeah, do we bleep out Heidi's sort of like profanities, or what? Do we just
no? So
tell everyone.
Yeah, so I think everyone will know by now that we swear.
Yeah,
anyone who's met us or anyone who's listened, they're aware of the profanity. And for anyone who tunes in and goes on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, there is a button I click saying explicit content, because I think I best put it on there and warn the listeners anyway,
I mean,
just in case.
To be fair, when I get in the flow and I'm delivering training or I'm delivering a talk, I often swear, because you just get into the flow of it because you're passionate about it, and you want to share knowledge and you want people to know. Yeah, it is about surrounding yourself with the right people. We keep going on about it, but the truth is, 95% of the people out there are comfortable. They're comfortable in their comfort zones, and they'll, without any disrespect, they're comfortable doing that. Let them do that. I basically have come to this very late, and I'm so glad that I did. And that, another little tiny story. One of my colleagues retired, and he rang me up and he said, Rob, you're in property, so he's retiring from the police. He's done 30 years in the police. He rang me up and he said, Rob, can we have a quick chat? I know you're involved in property. He lived in Winterton, actually, just down the road from Barton. And so basically we met in a pub in King's Arms in Beverley. And I asked, straight away, I asked him a question, which he obviously thought was quite weird. And when we talk about coming to stuff late, I said to him, how long do you intend to live for? And he went, oh, that's an odd question. I went, yeah, but you've just retired. You're only 50 years of age, 49, 50 years of age. How long do you intend retiring for? Or how long do you intend to live? And he said, oh, I don't know, probably another 30 years. I said, well, that's interesting, because you've just had one career which lasted 30 years in the police. Why don't, rather than getting a couple of houses, don't you start another career in property, which is far less time consuming when you do it properly than actually doing 40 hours a week, 60 hours a week in a job, and you get far, far greater rewards for it. But of course, he never did that. He just went out and bought 2 houses for cash, and totally unencumbered, because he didn't want debt, and didn't want to leverage his money. Why? Because he's risk averse. And so it's interesting. I think you're right about the Chinese proverb. Start. There's no better time to start than there is now, and especially now with a volatile market, because that's another disempowering belief. is that, oh, the mortgage rates are too high, you know, it's too expensive to get into the property game at the moment. No, what it means is that there are more opportunities for you to get into the property game, because some people can't afford those mortgages, and some people are looking for ways to divest themselves of their portfolio, and you can come along and solve their problem, which is what I talk about a lot, which is finding out what the problem is, do a really good fact find by asking the right questions in the right way, find out what the issue is, find out what the problem is, and then solve their problem using one of the property strategies, whether it's rent to rent, whether it's purchase lease option, whether it's assisted sale, vendor finance, EDC, and, you know, whatever, BRRR. And I know you use different sort of pseudonym acronyms than I do, but, you know, there's just so many ways you can solve people's problems, but you need to have that knowledge yourself about how you might solve those problems.
Yeah, and I think I work in sales, for example, and I have done for a number of years, and it's transferable, because in property, for example, you know, like you say, without sounding too cliche, you're solving people's problems. Now, in sales, whether it's a single product or you're delivering a service, etc., you need to identify what that person's pain points are to then provide a tailored bespoke solution in order to solve that. Same as sales, same as property. If someone has negative equity, and they can't sell because they don't have enough money, then you can look at taking on the mortgage, like say a purchase lease option, agree a price and pay for it in the future, but babysit their mortgage. Obviously, there's a lot more nuances, etc. to that. Or, you know, someone doesn't need the money now, they just want to sell. You could do a vendor finance and pay them back over time and help secure There's so many different strategies, but again, it's understanding that person's pain points or their motivation, I think, is one of the key terms of why they want to sell or what they want to do. Because people think, you know, people who aren't in the property space think selling is the only way to get out of a property. Until you educate them, it's a sales and it's an educational piece. So you don't need to do this. You can do 1, 2, or 3. Which one sounds best for you? You know, and this is probably a whole nother podcast about, you know, understanding vendors' pain points and delivering the solutions and etc. So it's really important.
I said exactly that this morning when I was coaching somebody. I said, I often ask people who I'm coaching, say, look, if somebody tells you they want to sell their property, what do they want to do? And the answer usually is they want to sell the property. And I go, well, how do they know? Because they've not got the knowledge and the specialist knowledge in order to come up with the solution themselves for their problem. That's where you come in. But you have to find out the facts. You have to find out what their motivation is in order to find out what the pain point is in order to come up with the correct solution. So you touched on it there. You just alluded to it, which I picked up on, was what's the motivation? You know, now sometimes you can't help people. You know, the vendor just says, I want a sale, I want the money now, and I want market value for it. And for you and I, that probably wouldn't stack up. But you also mentioned vendor finance, and that's a massive limiting belief, isn't it? If you went to somebody in the pub and say, I've just bought a property, I didn't have any money, the person who's selling the property lent me the money to buy their property, I think they'd look at you like you'd gone you were on something, you know, that you'd been taking something, you know, and it's just getting your mind around that concept that the person who's selling it is going to lend you the money to buy it. It's like, Jesus, where's that come from? But I've got several coachees who've done that over the years, you know, and it's a, you know, once again, once you know that there are solicitors out there are brokers out there, not your high street people, not your run-of-the-mill high street, no disrespect to them, they're there, they're doing a job, but there are specialist support teams out there you can use who understand what it is that you're trying to achieve. Again, it opens up a whole plethora of options for you that ordinary people don't have. I was doing a talk in Cardiff, and there was 50 odd people, investors in the room, and every single investor in that room had properties in Cardiff, nearly every single investor, yet not one of them had done a purchase lease option. And I said, listen up, you need to listen to my talk, because you are not finding out what the problem is, you're just solving the problem by buying. And you don't need to. There are other options available. None are done rent to rent, none are done purchase lease options. They are just solve the problems by purchasing. And sometimes that's the best way to do it. It's the easiest way to do it. If you've got the money and you get it at a cracking price. Don't get me wrong. You shouldn't be doing a strategy just for the sake of it. You do the best strategy that suits you and suits them. So, yeah. But
Yeah, definitely.
finding out what the problem is most people's stumbling block. And I think that's another big light on moment for a lot of people, Dan, is they'll say, oh, I haven't been into the estate agents. They never get off the backside and go out and actually do anything and take action. And they go, oh, I don't want to look like an idiot. And I go, well, why would you look like an idiot? You run your own company. You're a very successful individual. You called it, Dan, transferable skills. You've got transferable skills. So it's a big light on moment for a lot of people when I'm training, when I go, actually, you think you're a complete and utter newbie in property? You're not. You've got 80% of the skill set from your, like you said, Heidi, about your experience in the prison service and dealing with those types of people. That's really stood you in fantastic stead for what you're now currently doing, which is the rent model, etc. So it's not as if it's like, oh, I don't know anything about property, I'm completely new. It's disabusing yourself of that disempowering belief that I'm completely new and thinking, right, what skill set have I got? How can I use that skill set? So for me, for example, as well, I know I'm going on here and shut me up if you need to, but
No, feel
basically,
free.
it's my skill set is, you've probably gathered, is going out there, chatting to people, getting lots of information. So my marketing technique and getting leads was networking, speaking to agents, speaking to letting agents, and dealing with deal sources who I could, because I had the specialist knowledge as well, I didn't just have to rely on what they told me. I could do my own due diligence. So then I would speak to a number of deal sources, and then of course what you do is you then narrow that down until you're dealing with a couple of deal sources, you're dealing with a couple of local independent estate agents, a couple of local independent letting agents, and before you know it, you're getting the deals coming in that suit your criteria. That's how I did it, using the skill set that I already had from the police of knowing how to talk to people and, dare I say it, interview them and get information out of them that they didn't even want to give me.
Oh, I like that. I'm scared now.
You're all right. Well, I'm also a hypnotherapist, Heidi. So, and you're back in the room. So, yeah.
Do you know, we could have some right good we should do another podcast on you hypnotising us and then getting all the information out and seeing what happens.
Yeah, that'd be an interesting one. Yeah, Darren Brown Mark II.
Yeah.
It is interesting, and I want to also focus on another point. Obviously, it's put you in good stead, and it's something that working in sales, and there's the ethical piece behind it. I know there is an ethical argument around neurolinguistic programming, or NLP for short. Depending on how you use it, but it is obviously played an important factor in your success and your career. Could you just tell us a bit more about NLP and what it is and how you use it to your advantage, but ethically?
It's never been a question for me about doing it ethically, and I suppose I got that from being in the police. Because you set your own standards in life at the end of the day, and things happen around you, and people, live life by their values and their standards and their ethics. That's their issue. It's not mine. I've got my ethics and my values. So I went into NLP, but what I realized is I actually have been using NLP for a lot of years, such as, the right questioning, using questioning technique, open questions to then funnel down into leading, into really firming up exactly what it is that they're talking about, using mirroring and pacing and that sort of thing, doing it naturally. And by mirroring and pacing is basically reflecting what the people's doing in front of you in order to build rapport very quickly. All of these things, again, I would suggest people Google and have a look at, because this isn't a training session. But for me, NLP I have used not to manipulate because I don't, and that's a fine line, isn't it? That's where you talk about your ethics.
Yeah, of course.
Between influencing and manipulating people in order to do something that they wouldn't normally do. To me, it's not about that. I influence people in order to get them where they want to be. That's how I've always coached, and that's how I've always mentored. So it's about guidance and influencing. Because at the end of the day, I can't make anybody do what they don't want to do anyway. So I've got to influence them, And so you influence them by using the right arguments and the right suggestions in order of how you get them to where they want to be, understanding where they want to be. That's how I've used NLP, understanding the way they communicate as well, which is either visual or auditory or kinesthetically, or olfactory and etc. So again, VACOG, people look at that on Google, understand that I'm going to speak the same language. Another thing that has really stood me in good stead as well is personality profiling. So I'm fairly good at picking up what different personality profiles people are. So again, when I'm dealing with them, I can mirror their language and play their language back at them. And that's really so important with vendors, and using their own language. So you said you're looking for cash. What sort of cash? How much cash? When do you need the cash by? So that's what my book's about as well, is picking up on those. The hardest thing in life, and you've done it really well, you two, is which I'm surprised at for Heidi, because I know Heidi really well, is basically active listening is very, very difficult to do, because most people listen to
I know
respond.
my wife tells me that.
Yeah. Well, let's not go down that bloody rabbit hole,
Selective listening.
Yeah, we are. Men are very good at selective listening. But the truth is, active listening is a very... Look, I was once listening to somebody who'd just done some rock climbing in the Olympics. And during the interview, they talked about, and I couldn't believe this, it blew my mind, they talked about having a finger coach. So she said, I've been working with my finger coach on strengthening and working with my fingers, and my forearm coach. So besides her nutritional coach and besides her strength coach, she had a forearm coach just for her forearm and the forearm muscles and just her fingers. And that's where I get slightly frustrated when people say, oh, I've already got a coach, Rob, I've already got a mentor. And it's like, but you can't be a coach in all things. You can't be a mentor in all things. And I know that communication is one of the key things that you need in order to be successful in property, whether you're dealing with tenants, whether you're dealing with agents, whether you're dealing with potential investors, and when you're dealing with sellers. Communication is absolutely key. And therefore, why not have somebody who specializes in communication? And the danger is that, like a lot of things in life, because we do it every day, we think we're good at it. And because we do it every day, if we're not careful, we get complacent at it. And you need somebody stood outside of you, that independent person, to start asking you some questions about, tell me about what the vendor said. Okay, what did you hear then? Because I've actually heard, when I listen to the answers, I actually hear different things to what the person who's being coached says.
It's perception as well, isn't it? Everyone has a different perception of an answer. So someone might, say one thing and you perceive it completely different to what they're trying to translate. And you touched on a point there, which just made me think. So you said about like the mirroring of the language, and they use the word cash and you use the word cash. And I did an interview for a job. I did get it a while ago, and one of the key things they picked up on is how I mirrored the language throughout the interview. Based on when they give me answers, I'd repeat their answer in a different way using certain language, then obviously give my thing. And I think that, like you say, it comes from practice. I work in sales, so I have to practice these things on a daily basis. But if you are new to it, they are little points you can pick up on. And I'm going to really embarrass myself here, but one of the first sort of introductions, I'd say, to influencing was I read a book called The Game by Neil Strauss, right? And Neil Strauss, years ago, he was a journalist, and he followed some guy around who, think of like Russell Brand type looking bloke, but he could get every woman he wanted. And it was all about how he used different techniques like peacocking, NLP, language, mirroring, and all this sort of stuff. But, you know, I didn't read it to try and pick up women. Never worked anyway. But it was literally just interesting to how you can use different language and even your body language and your mirroring. And, you know, if someone sits like that, then you a bit later sit like that, because it's subconsciously building that rapport and that building that connection between two individuals. And I think you touched on it then. I think it's a really, really key important point that people should try and learn to do, because there's communicating and there's communicating effectively. And I think they're two different things.
Yeah, and you keep saying you're in sales. You know, there's a difference between sales, negotiation, and closing. You know, and I know I'm not a very good closer, if I'm honest. People ring me up and I'm interested in your coaching, Rob, and we have a great chat, but I'm not that brilliant at closing, because it takes a certain skill set to close a deal. And Nicola's really good at it. So when we were negotiating deals with people, I would do all the fact find. I would do all the sort of negotiation, this and the other. Nicola would close the deal, because if we didn't, I would carry on talking and probably come up with another deal which was better for them. And so we had to have that little tiny smack under the table or whatever it was to say, shut up, Rob, time's up now for me. So people don't. It is a skill set, is communication. And for example, I call it the 3 C's of building rapport. One of the first C is be curious. Just be curious about people. It's about them. It's not about you. It's about them, about understanding them, about understanding their needs and what they want in terms of the deal. Then the next thing is once you're curious about them, they will give you something that you can connect with. Well, you can find is common ground. So, it's, even when I was talking to Heidi there, I said, it's near Winterton. It's like there's a bit of common ground there, because I know you're in Barton, Winterton's just round the corner. So immediately you've got that common ground. And once you've got common ground, you start to make a connection. And that's what you're really after. You are really after that connection, and I know we've had some bloody connection problems with this Zoom, with this thing. But in terms of connecting with people, it's about rapport, and I want people to sell to me because they want to sell to me, and I can guarantee you, and I know I have bought properties at a lower price than the person's been offered by somebody else because they've wanted me to do the deal. They wanted me to have the deal, because I've got that connection with them, and they wanted that. It's all boils down to rapport and trust, know, like, and trust. These and the problem is, Heidi and Dan, if you're not careful, these all sound like bloody cliches. Oh, here he is, he's spouting another cliche. Know, like, and trust. But there's a reason why they've been around for since the time of bloody Socrates and Plato and Aristotle. There's a reason. Yeah. It's because they work, 100%. Win friends and influence people, by Carnegie, 1937 that was published. It's still applicable today as it was then, Find connection, be curious, ask about them, find a common ground, and you will find common ground. There's always common ground to be found. I don't have any children, but I might go into a vendor's house and I'll look at the pictures. Oh, that's a lovely, I was on Zoom the other day and somebody had a big picture of an elephant behind them. And it's like, oh, that's a great picture of an elephant. What do you like elephants? Have you ever seen an elephant? Oh, I've seen an elephant in South Africa, and combined with a bit of enthusiasm and a bit of passion, you've got it. I know some people do find it difficult because of the different personality types, but at the end of the day, you need to hone that then. That's what it's about. And if you can't do it, then leverage it and find somebody else who can do it for you.
That's why me and Dan work together. It makes me laugh because I was 19 and I started working with sex offenders. And I had to build rapport with paedophiles at 19. And I tell you what, I fucking learned fast. So just makes me laugh.
You're probably too old
for
that's
the
anyway.
other thing as well. And you mentioned something there. You've got to suspend your personal, because you're being professional, Heidi. It's the same in the job. You know, when I dealt with sex offenders and child abusers and what have you, you have to suspend your values and treat people. Now then, I had a massive argument with somebody once when he said, "Oh, you've got to treat everybody with respect." You know, and I said, "No, I don't. I don't have to treat anybody with respect who buggers their children. You know, that's not respect. You know, will I deal with them professionally and will I deal with them fairly? Yes, I will. But don't expect me to have respect for somebody who does that, you know, and or abuses the wife or batters the wife. That's not. I'm not going to respect them. So, but you have to deal with people in a professional manner. We could digress and go down that road quite significantly. But you know, the truth is, you know, you and especially I want to work with people. I always think that at the end of the day, when I'm going into an estate agent, when I'm going in to work with investors, I'm forming a relationship and I want the relationship to last. So if the ethics don't work, if the values don't work, if there is something that I've got a little red flag, I'd rather say thanks but no thanks, because there'll be somebody round the corner. There'll be another deal round the corner. There'll be somebody else to work with round the corner. I do believe that if you take action, you know, the universe delivers. That's not to say that you can just buy a lottery ticket and will it to win. You've got to be in it to win it. You've got to work at it. But I do believe that you get what, you know, there's another, if a deal don't come off, don't become a motivated buyer. You know, there's a lot of people become motivated buyers. Don't become a motivated buyer. There will be another deal around the corner.
Oh, I like that. That was good, that.
Yeah, no, perfect. And I think, you know, we're sort of starting to round off. And we've got a few quick questions that we'd like to finish up on. So I'd like to just ask a few quick fire questions. And I know, Heidi, we have the
coach from.
Pardon? Was it what?
Where you get a finger coach from?
Yeah, where do you get a finger coach from?
Fucking mental.
You've been working with too many bloody sex offenders. That's your problem.
No, I'm trying to raise a bit. I haven't been out too long.
I know. So yeah, we digress. Heads out the gutter. But no, in terms of quick fire questions, it's only 2 or 3 questions, quick answers, and then Heidi will ask the charity question at the end. So, what book are you currently reading now, and what would you recommend it?
I've just finished. I read 2 or 3 books at the same time. So I'm currently reading The Rules of Thinking by Richard Templar. Last week I finished The Psychology of Money.
Good book.
And I've just reread The E-Myth by Keller, is it? Or Geller?
Nice. These all are my Audible, and I'm halfway through all of them, and that was probably about a year and a half ago that I finished. But I'm in the car a lot more now, so I should put them back on. Second question, what's your biggest achievement to date that you're proud of?
I suppose the biggest achievement I've got is I am able to do, within reason, what I want. I'm able to work with the people I want to work with. I can pick and choose who I work with, which is it's priceless, really.
Yeah.
I'm not desperate to work with people that I have to work with people I don't want to work with. So I can work with people who are enthusiastic, who are going to take action, who want to better themselves, and that is very, very rewarding. So I'm in a great place that basically we can go to South Africa for 6 months of the year, spread throughout the year. And I'm pleased about the last 10 years that I did get out my comfort zone and I've placed myself in this position. So that's my greatest achievement, that I not reversed, that's wrong, but certainly altered course. And I said at times I felt like an oil tanker. After 34 years of having an employee mindset in the police, I felt like an oil tanker trying to reverse, trying to change course. It just took me a lot longer than some people who are younger, who are like little speedboats. They can alter course very rapidly. I couldn't, but I'm pleased that I kept altering course and ploughing on.
Perfect. And final one from me, what piece of advice would you give someone who is either just starting out or midway through their journey and may have limiting beliefs?
Have the right invest in yourself. And I know that is a cliche, but invest in yourself. Either, find a coach, find a mentor that will help you implement the specialist knowledge that you can get online, in books, on webinars, and going on courses. But the biggest advice is make sure it's self-development and not shelf development. Apply what it is that you are learning. Get out your comfort zone. You have to take action. You cannot learn to drive by reading the highway code. At some point, you've got to get in the car. And we all know, anybody who's learned to drive, it ain't easy. At first, you are, looking in the mirror, trying to steer, trying to use your bloody feet, trying to change gear with your hands. It's not easy. At that point, you become what's known as consciously incompetent. Yeah. You now know that you can't do. You've got to get past that. You've got to work through that, and it's uncomfortable. You learn to live with being uncomfortable, but have a safety net.
Perfect. I think that's a key bit of advice there.
Yeah, I love that. Okay. That's awesome. I feel like you've hypnotized me. Can you make me a millionaire, please? So the last question from us is more like a charity shout out. So we'd just like to shout out any charities anyone would like to. So have you got one close to your heart or anything?
Well, it's interesting you say heart. Yeah, the British Heart Foundation. They were my father-in-law died of a heart attack. My dad died of a heart attack. A colleague who I think I broached with you this before the podcast started, a colleague who was only 58 had a heart attack this morning and passed away. So the British Heart Foundation, I always donate. I donate to them anyway on a monthly basis, and everything. So that would be the one. Yeah,
lovely. Thank you for that.
I think it's a great place to leave it here, but we should definitely have you on for another episode in the future, Rob. This has been one of my favourite recordings. So Thanks for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure. Lots of insight, lots of value given there. And for those listening, we are going to be doing a giveaway. Rob has kindly offered to give away 5 of his books. Do you want to just tell us about the book and what it's about?
The book is called Perfecting Property Conversations. It's an Amazon. It is an Amazon #1 bestseller because that's what happened. So yeah, up yours, my family. At the end of the day, it's really based around a conversation management model. So it's about you managing a conversation. So it's about planning and preparing for your conversations, about potentially practicing. It's about then engaging, exploring, and how that conversation evolves, and then resolving it, reflecting and refining it. Because people talk about 10,000 hours makes you perfect. Actually, 10,000 hours doesn't make you perfect. 10,000 iterations make you perfect. In other words, if you do 10,000 hours of the same thing, you'll end up just doing the same thing 10,000 times. It's about reflection and refinement. So the book helps you reflect and refine on your conversations so that you can think about, right, I had a discussion with that vendor. How did it go? What did I say? What did I do? And it helps you then to refine that so that you improve. And of course, the more you improve, the more your confidence grows, and then and deals start to really fall into place.
Amazing.
Love that.
Thank you very much, Rob. And listen, good luck with the rest of your business, coaching, mentoring, property stuff, and your next trip to South Africa. Extremely jealous.
Well, you can do it. Anybody can do it with, apply themselves and implement it and set your stall out. Have a great vision about what it is that you want to achieve. Your house doesn't have to be South Africa, of course. It can be, it could be Cleethorpes, Right. But if that's what you want, that's what you want,
Brilliant. Cheers, Rob.
Excellent. Thank you.
Unbelievable. Thank you for joining us this week. We hope we added value to your day. Stay tuned and see you next time for another Humberside episode. See you next time.